Hi everyone. I'm Maddie, and I chose to do my project on Noam Chomsky and his contributions to the field of psychology, particularly psycholinguistics and the cognitive revolution. Just some background on Chomsky here to start out with. He was a professor of linguistics at Massachusetts Institute of Technology. He was born in Philadelphia, Pennsylvania on December 7th, 1928, and he is still alive. His parents were actually very highly educated Jewish immigrants, his father actually being a scholar of medieval Hebrew. And that sort of influenced Chomsky's passion for language, which eventually led to him studying linguistics at the University of Pennsylvania and then earning him a junior fellowship position at Harvard University, where renowned psychologists B.F. Skinner and George A. Miller were also present at the time. But he didn't actually cross paths with them until a little later in his career. He was mostly known for his studies in linguistics and political activism, but his brief stint with psychology and his influence on psycholinguistics was really significant. In 1955, he published his doctoral thesis, and in 1956 began working with George A. Miller at Harvard. In 1957, he published Syntactic Structures, which was a manuscript introducing his nativist theory of transformational grammar, which was essentially a theory explaining and understanding grammatical processing in the brain. This theory immensely benefited the then newer field of cognitive psychology, stating that the ability to learn and use language is an innate capability only humans possess. He further illustrated this grammatical hardwiring with the sentence on the screen there, colorless green ideas sleep furiously. This is a sentence which is grammatically correct, but syntactically nonsensical. His work was first introduced to the field of psycholinguistics in the 1960s, once syntactic structures gained popularity and took off, but also when he published his criticism of Skinner's behaviorist theory of language acquisition, which was expressed in his book, Verbal Behavior. Chomsky's criticism of Skinner's behaviorist theory on language acquisition triggered a shift from behaviorism to nativism in the field of psychology. In his criticism of verbal behavior, he argued that Skinner's theory of conditioning and learning theory can't really be applied to language learning. While Skinner stated that language learning happened through correct utterances being reinforced, Chomsky pretty wholeheartedly disagreed with that, saying that it doesn't take into consideration people's abilities to use language to form original sentences, even ones that don't make sense. For example, the green ideas sentence that was mentioned in the previous slide. He also argued that a stimulus-response conditioning would be radically inefficient in learning how to speak and properly use an entire language. He sort of further establishes this point in a quote that I pulled from his writings on Cartesian linguistics that I kind of liked. Universal conditions are not learned. They provide the organizing principles that make the learning possible. The speaker of a language knows a great deal that he has not learned. And Skinner just kind of shrugged Chomsky's response off, supposedly didn't even finish reading Chomsky's criticism of his work, and just took the stance of agreeing to disagree. Miller, however, who was once very loyally behaviorist, actually reconsidered his behaviorist perspective after reading Chomsky's response to verbal behavior. And that proved to be a very influential part in the cognitive revolution. And the diagram on the screen here just sort of compares and contrasts the behaviorist perspective with Skinner's theory and the nativist perspective with Chomsky's theory, and then also mentions the interactionist perspective, which incorporates kind of both Skinner and Chomsky's ideas. Much of Chomsky's influence on psychology wasn't necessarily direct, however, and more so came from his interactions with Miller and Skinner. But Miller, being a pioneer in the cognitive revolution and an original psycholinguist, really integrated Chomsky's ideas into psychology and cognitive science, supplementing his arguments against behaviorism with Chomsky's work. Noam Chomsky's idea of universal grammar and this innate capability to learn language has really established itself as something significant in many fields, including cognitive psychology, developmental psychology, linguistics, and anthropology, and is still, along with much of Chomsky's other work, very highly regarded and has really earned him a position as a pioneer of psychology. It's also earned him the Benjamin Franklin Medal in Computer and Cognitive Sciences, as well as the American Psychological Association's Distinguished Scientific Contribution Award. His theory of this hardwired capability really heavily contributed to the cognitive revolution, linking language learning to cognitive functioning and really forcing psychologists to rethink their approach to language acquisition. And then I have my references cited here.